Hey everybody, welcome. Hey folks, welcome. Everybody's already saying hi in the chat. Hello, hello. All right, we're getting it started. Welcome folks, so glad you're here. We will be kicking things off in just a moment here once the tens of thousands of people joining us for this call can all make it in. Wow, the chat is a thrill as always, moving quickly. How many people do we have? Around 18,000 folks already arrived in this webinar. I'm going to check the live stream counts in just a second here. Folks, go ahead and keep saying hi. We will be getting started in just a second here. All right, and welcome once more to everybody coming in from the waiting room or joining us on live streams right now. I think we are officially kept out on Zoom, so super excited to welcome everybody joining us on live stream as well. Zoom's at 20K. Looks like our live streams are collectively at a couple thousand and growing. And the chat, of course, is lively across the board. There's that funky little tune popping back in from our musical background. I think we're going to give it just one more second, and then we will go ahead and get started here. Keep saying hello in the chat, settle in, get what you need. We'll get started in just a second here. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to be getting started in just a moment here. Thank you so much for logging in and joining us. Zoom is maxed out at 20,000. What's my count on the live stream? I think we got a couple thousand and rising. I'm going to pull up the details in just a second here. Yeah, super excited to have everybody joining us. And if you're just arriving now, don't worry. We're just kind of kicking things off. And actually with that, let's go ahead and do it. Let's go to the next slide. Just a couple of basic pieces while folks are still arriving. As you're settling in, first of all, I just want to say, get a beverage, get some water, get comfortable. We're not going to be here all night, but, you just want to be able to focus. Maybe grab a notepad, some paper, something you want to take notes on. There's going to be some key stuff tonight that you might want to be able to save. If you would like to have captions turned on, you can look for the CC Show Captions button. We do have them turned on overall, but you might need to click that to see it on your end. And yeah, just one more little warm-up prompt for the night. Go ahead and share in the chat if you were with us last time for 1 Million Rising Session 1. Go ahead and share one insight you gained from that last session. Would love to hear a little bit of where folks are at. And I see we've got our emoji reacts working. That's a tool we'll probably leave on for a little bit of the night. Great to see the vibes there as well. Go ahead and share with us as you're settling in, just one insight or so saved from the last session. Alrighty, so I think we can go ahead. You know what? I think, give me one moment, folks. I'm going to pull up the slides in a different way here. Yep. Tech is a thing, and we are working it. Okay. There we go. We're going into SlideShare mode. Our beloved member of our team on the back end, their power just went out. So we had to pull up the slides in a different way, which we were ready for. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm just gonna go back to the title slide to kind of formally kick us off here in a different way. My name's Nora, I work with Indivisible. You see some faces of other folks who are gonna be core leading this training, and will introduce themselves in just a second. I'm here to just do some quick housekeeping. So let me give you all some orientation. Welcome to folks on Zoom. Welcome to folks on the live streams, the many of them. So excited to have tens of thousands of people here tonight for 1 Million Rising. So just to tell you about what you're watching tonight, in case you're tuning in for the first time, this is the second call of a 3-part series. If you want to see what you missed last time or you want to sign up for next time, we will remind you to do that a bunch later on, but you can grab that at nokings.org/rise. That's nokings.org/rise, and we'll drop that in the chat in just a second. Yes, don't worry, folks. We are absolutely recording this call. All the materials will be sent out afterwards. And I just want to mention a couple of things about that, and about kind of like making the most of our mass call space. In just a second, we are going to turn off the chat. It's such a big call space that it just allows us to be able to focus a little bit better if the chat is turned off. But if you want to be able to chat with folks, one of our facilitators, Ash, loves to kind of chat with folks on Blue Sky. You can use the hashtag 1millionrising to sort of tag your post and be in conversation with people that way. And I just want to say, for the moments when we do turn the chat back on, or even so far tonight, this is a powerful moment, and every now and then, some trolls, some folks who maybe don't have the best intent might stop through our space. If that happens, just, ignore and flood the chat with solidarity and good vibes, and just don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. So appreciate folks' thoughtfulness there. Just want to do a little bit more recap here. So what is 1 Million Rising all about? We're in a moment where we need to recognize our common goal, which is to fight against authoritarianism and this rising moment of authoritarian breakthrough, which means no kings, not just as an individual, but as an entire system that is propping up the rise of authoritarianism in the US and abroad. So in the first session of 1 Million Rising, we kind of talked about strategy, a strategic framework for this moment. And tonight we are giving you the tools to be able to get your own further training and also help spread that message beyond yourself. In our last session, which is coming up in 2 weeks on August 13th, we're offering ways to kind of plug into existing resistance campaigns and also support folks in plugging into work that's local to you. So a lot more to come about that, about ways of taking action. This is a moment where we need to build the community resilience and intersect that with the strategic action that we need to take in order to make it through this time and support each other through it. Want to tell you a little bit more about what to expect for tonight. So tonight is sort of an interesting mix of like embedded recap and deepening of what we covered last week, while also preparing you to share this content with others through your own community resistance gathering. If you're with us last time, or if you're just here for the first time tonight, I'll just tell you right now, the idea with the 1 Million Rising strategic framework is that we're inviting folks to host your own gathering with your own friends and family and people in your life, maybe people you don't know so well and are inviting into this work for the first time, to share ideas and strategies and eventually actions for what we can do together to fight this moment of authoritarian breakthrough. So there's going to be sort of an embedded review of the content where the trainers are going to model for you how you can cover these ideas yourself and in community with others. Really excited for y'all to see what Ash and Daniel and Maria have in store on that front. We'll do a closing recap with just some final ideas, links, next steps, other pieces. But first, I also just want to give you a quick peek at the Community Resistance Host Gathering Guide. So what's on the slide right now, I know there's a lot of tiny words in a tiny font that you probably can't read. That's totally fine. The goal is not for you to be able to read it right now. These are screenshots from a doc that's going to be shared with you at the end of this call, and that the facilitators are about to be walking you through over the course of the rest of the night. So I just want to highlight a couple of pieces. It includes directions about what to actually do during your gathering. Last time we shared with you a toolkit that was about logistics and planning. This is more like the agenda, even what you can say out loud. You'll see that there's suggested language, literally a script that you can use that's formatted in ways to try to help make it clear what's what. We really tried to design this guide to be as accessible and something that could make it easy for you to share these ideas, even if they're kind of new to you. And like, if they're new to you, don't worry, like they're kind of new to me too. Like I was just kind of getting onboarded to some of this recently. I'm also working on hosting a gathering in my own space. So even if you feel like, what, I'm supposed to like bring in others, don't worry. That's what, literally tens of thousands of other people are doing with you tonight and over the next few weeks. Okay, I think now is when I want to pass it over to one of our facilitators to kick us off with tonight's core content. Daniel, is this you?
That's me. Hi, everyone. Delighted to be with you, and really excited for those of you who have agreed to host a gathering. That's great. For those of you who are still considering, that's great. For those of you who are not going to do one, that's great too. because I think a lot of the content that we're going to cover today, tonight, will be a chance to just kind of deepen our practice of how we talk about the moment we're in and how we talk about non-cooperation. And before we kind of go anywhere into the host aspect of it, and what we're going to do is kind of modeling what you might do in your own gathering. But before we do any of that, we want to just kind of talk about sort of levels of non-cooperation. So you see on your slide, if you can see, it says levels of non-cooperation. So first one is individual and small group non-cooperation. And great news, everyone. Most non-cooperation starts here. Actually, pretty much all non-cooperation starts here. It starts small. So if you're looking around and wondering why isn't there more, I can join that. And it always starts at this level, at a smaller level, a group of people. With plenty of examples of that, of already people like in motion. So I'm thinking about there's an AFT union member, Sarah Anama. Some of you may have heard her story from Idaho. So she was ordered, she's a teacher at an elementary school, and she was ordered to take down our Everyone is Welcome poster as part of this attack on DEI. And so she was told, you can't have a poster that says everyone is welcome. And she said, no, I can and I will. That's what it means to be a teacher. That's the value I live on. So she took the courageous path and she refused, non-cooperated, non-complied, whatever word you want to use, stuck up for her values, was intransigent, just pick your word. But she did the thing that was of her value, the thing inside of her. And her story resonated out from other people. So a local radio station, excuse me, a local TV station interviewed her. And so the community began rallying to her message. And so a screen printer offered to print out everyone is welcome as t-shirts, and kids along with parents started to chalk everyone is welcome outside the school. And so the value was reiterated again and again. And so that's as you see like an action that as individual can move to the collective. Or just another, I'll give two more examples of just like individual actions of these times. So you may have seen some of the different law firms who are capitulating, right? So Paul Weiss, I think, was the first one out, if I recall correctly, that gave $40 million of pro bono services was the agreement to Donald Trump in order to publicly end their DEI practice and so forth and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of pushback. I mean, there's a lawyer who wrote, Paul Weiss didn't just bend a knee, it set a new standard for shameful capitulation. But other law firms began to follow suit and start to, maybe we should also capitulate and negotiate. And this does happen. I think we shouldn't freak out when some big institutions capitulate, because that does happen in authoritarian regimes. In fact, often the bigger they are, the harder it is for them to not feel like, well, we'll just make a deal and whatever. But so what stops that? And in this moment, the thing that first happened was Rachel Cohen, single individual woman who, in a blazing letter of condemnation, said it is just absolutely wrong, and said, I am not standing for this as a member of the law firm. And so she then did the thing that's important, which is you don't just act on your own. She then said, I want other people to also stand with me. And so she began a petition within the law firm community, and got 300 signatures, which 300 isn't a big number, but in the law community, again, we're in that community. So that's a big deal. And that began to blaze a trail that created a space for more law firms to take stances against Trump, Jenner, Block, Perkins Coie, et cetera, et cetera. So the end result isn't all figured out, but there are more and more, I think, clear that those who capitulate are beginning to regret that decision. Just one more example of individual level. So it was printed in the New York Times today of a woman, Elizabeth Castillo. And so she's a mother of five. She lives in Pasadena, just outside of LA. And she saw six people who were being snatched up by ICE at a nearby donut shop. And so she just began to get in motion. And her version of non-cooperation, non-compliance, was to go outside with a megaphone in the mornings and just follow where ICE was going. So she warned people when ICE was coming into her neighborhood, into her apartment complex. And so she just began patrols in the morning. She woke up early in the morning and just walked around, and wherever she saw ICE operating, just pulled out her megaphone, and here they are. And then she began operating more collectively. And that was when she got connected to the National Day Labor Organizing Network, and so they got her connected to other folks who are also tracking ICE activity, and that they began part of a growing body of people who are non-cooperating. What you'll notice in each of these stories is that they grow into collective non-cooperation, but they do that in part because they've done a couple of things, which is one, they make sure that other people can support them. They don't just act alone as they non-cooperate, but other people can connect. They've got a petition ready to get other law people, or they connect with other organizations who are acting. Two is they let trusted people know ahead of time. So Rachel had contacted other people she was intending to quit publicly. Elizabeth like began contacting her neighbors, and so there was that bringing your circle in. It's a huge reason why we're supporting these house meetings, because if you don't have that, it's much harder to get to the next stages. And so obviously we want everybody getting to bigger levels of cooperation, but it takes steps. And a third is you have to be ready to organize afterwards. So if you do some non-cooperation, you gotta keep your organizing, bring in new people, bring more people in. And the fourth to remember is that backlash isn't always the worst thing. So just because one was threatened to be fired, just because there's not always going to be straight lines of victories. I told three stories that looked like a natural escalation, and it only looked like a natural escalation after the fact. But it does, in fact, take courage. And so all three of those people have shown great amounts of courage, along with thousands, tens of thousands of others in this country. And so what we're in a moment of is we're in a moment in which lots of people need to take a lot of courage. Okay, so individual to collective non-cooperation to mass. So let's go to that next slide of mass non-cooperation. And mass non-cooperation, which some people were asking questions like, why don't we just do a general strike? Which is very smart because many countries have pulled off general strikes as a moment to take out an authoritarian regime, not just the authoritarian, but the entire regime. However, you have to have your people organized. You have to have the networks set up. You have to have the relationships such that when you make that call, many people will join. And I think an assessment of where we are in this country is that we are not at a tipping point of mass non-cooperation, mass protests, big, large actions, big rallies, etc. But in terms of large scale, like a general strike or large scale, like massive economic boycotts of systems, for example, or tax resistant strikes, those kind of things, we're not, my assessment, I'll just speak for my own self, isn't that we're at that point. But the way that we get there is that we move through these cycles and that we move through individual non-cooperation, move to more collective non-cooperation, which is what we're encouraging people to do. So what you'll hear through this session is encouragement for people to kind of pick their lane. If you haven't already picked a lane, pick what's some areas of non-cooperation, issue, etc., that might be good for you. And especially what we're at for, I think, a lot of groups is let's kind of scan horizon for what are the different tactics that work for where we are. And so that's where we want to begin supporting people. So what we're going to do over the next period of time is we're going to walk through an agenda that we're encouraging folks to do in your local groups. And again, many of you have already agreed to be hosts, love it. And many of you might agree to be hosts, love it. That's our hidden agenda, is we want more people to host. And the reason for that is because those are structures that can support us to step into more courage, or structures that can support us to move from just individual acts of I'm doing my own thing to acting collectively. And those of us who are already moving collectively, it can expand even further, a new circle out. Okay, so what we're going to do, next slide, what we're going to do is kind of walk through the agenda. So if we were in a smaller group, we would just like facilitate all of y'all, and it would be so cushy and warm and lovely. And the downside of having 20,000, 40,000, whatever number of people are participating right now, the downside of it is we can't quite model exactly that. So we're going to do our best to kind of act as if we are all in a warm, come to my house and we're going to sit down together and we're going to have some conversation, and it'll just be awkward because we're on, interfaced by technology. But we're going to walk through it. I'm going to invite you to just take notes along the way about things you see us do. There'll be moments where we won't be able to be fully interactive, but some things we say or some ways that we kind of invite people in or ways that we put our things together that fit for how you might want to host a gathering or how you might want to talk with someone else about. And so that's the invitation is take some notes. And the last piece before I hand it over to Ash is that we're going to be doing our best to kind of be as interactive as we can, but also you can imagine yourself like what's the kind of ways that you would want to bring your own style, your own rhythm, your own et cetera into hosting, because all of you will have your own style and rhythm and so forth, just as all three of us have our own style and rhythm. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Ash, and we'll just do this I'll explain three parts, which is one part, an opening, second part, which will kind of be the content piece, and then the third part, which will be like kind of next steps. So that's the basic arc, and I think that'll make a lot of sense. Over to you, Ash, to kind of model again what we'll be doing as like the what this might look like. So you'll see as the slides will go, you'll see uh, if you're able to read it, the actual agenda. But again, that'll be in the host guide, and we won't model it exactly, but we'll get the spirit of the thing. Over to you, Ash.
So again, you all are now in Ashley's home. You are in my crib. We are opening up a community gathering in my living room. So welcome, welcome. I'm glad that you are here. I, like you, am stressed out about what I'm seeing happening in this country. Stressed isn't even the word. I'm mad about it. I'm sad. I'm grieving about it. And I want to turn that energy into some meaningful engagement, some meaningful work to actually stop the consolidation of this evil that we're seeing all over the country and actually build a country that's worth our values, that's aligned with our desire for everyone to have what they need. So I think I'm in the right place in my home with you because I think you all also want those things. So welcome. I want to set the expectation that, you know, we all know something, but none of us know everything. If we did and we were actively pursuing that, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. So we're gonna debate. We're gonna share our opinions and our feelings. There's space enough in this room for all of that. We might not agree, but we won't be disrespectful to one another. I think we can also agree on that. Give me some body language. Let me know I'm right. Lovely. All right. So, and we're not going to answer every question in our first community gathering together, or second or third or fourth probably either. But what I do know for sure is that us being together creates an opportunity for us to be more courageous. I've heard from many of you that you're scared and that fear is real. And I promise that we'll be able to do more together than we would be able to do separately. And your presence here today actually is an invitation to me for me to be even more courageous. So thank you for that. Look, I want you to look around at the other folks that are in this room. I want you to look around just online. I see you all talking to each other. We can do it right now. We don't even have to pretend. See all the folks that are using the 1 million rising hashtag, the no kings hashtag. Feel the solidarity in this room. See the tens of thousands of other people that are also gathering because we don't want to be alone in this work and we don't have to be. Let that inspire you to continue to go down this path, bending the moral arc of the universe towards justice. Now we're going to take a moment for each and every one of us to go around, say your name, say your pronouns, which is what I would call you if it's not your name, if I'm addressing you by something that's not your name. So, for example, my name's Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. They also use she and her to describe me, but my kid sometimes calls me broski. So anything in right relationship is good for me. And tell me one reason that you're in this room. What brought you here? We can do that in this space online with everybody getting an opportunity. But if you were in my house, I'd probably ask you to turn to your neighbor, as my pastor says, and introduce yourself. So if I was opening, that it would go a little something like that, Daniel.
Beautiful. I hope folks are taking notes along the way of things that you might want to borrow, steal, adapt. And let's go to the next slide. So we'll do a part two. So we now open into the part two portion, which is authoritarianism and non-cooperation. You will see if you've watched the first session, no worries if you haven't, but if you've watched the first session, you'll see some repeated slides. And the reason for that is just to like underline the points, but we'll say it in yet another way. Off to you, Maria.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you all tonight. So I'm Maria Stefan with the Horizons Project, and we're going to be talking about the context in which we're in and the authoritarian breakthrough that we talked about during the last session. And just to say, one of the things that gives me hope in this moment, besides being on mass calls with tens of thousands of you all, is, having spent the last 25 years or so working with movements around the world that have fought for freedom against authoritarian regimes and hearing their stories, not only of what they've faced and kind of the elements of the authoritarian playbook, but also how they have organized, how they've pushed back, and how they've prevailed. And that gives me tremendous hope in this moment. And I'm also aware of our own long history of resisting authoritarianism in this country, and believe that, our work in this moment can very much draw on that legacy from our own history. So, when we're talking about the context of authoritarianism, and you can go to the next slide, I think it's important to situate what's happening in the United States in a larger global context. Now, an important thing to know is that we are facing a 2-decade-long wave of autocratization around the world. So this wave is touching all the regions of the world. And, instead of seeing like military coups or tanks in the streets, that's not how democracies are dying anymore. Instead, we are seeing democracies die subtle deaths, starting at the ballot box when democratically elected leaders go on to subvert the norms and institutions of democracy. They often do this using legal means, and they justify their actions as, oh, well, we're actually defending democracy and the rule of law. So that can be confusing sometimes, that they're actually using the means of democracy to undermine democracy. And, and this is exactly the strategy, the playbook that Viktor Orban of Hungary has used, that Bolsonaro of Brazil has used, that Erdogan of Turkey has used, that Netanyahu of Israel has used, using kind of the institutions of democracy to fundamentally undermine freedoms and consolidate power. So, and I think it's important to, as we talk about this rapid consolidation of authoritarianism at the federal level, which is new in the US. This aspect, it's important to understand that there is a long history of authoritarianism in this country grounded in misogyny and racism. And those on this call from the South are intimately familiar with what state-level authoritarianism looks and feels like. And if we think in this country about the rise of fascism in the 1930s, if we think about Jim Crow racial authoritarianism in the South following Reconstruction, and we think about today's MAGA movement, they all arise from the same roots. So just to be clear, winning an election or removing a single leader from power is not going to end authoritarianism in America. That requires a whole hell of a lot more work. And if we don't succeed in stopping the authoritarian power grab that's happening now, our work to advance in America that never has been, but must be, to quote Langston Hughes, gets a whole lot harder. So authoritarian leaders on the left and the right around the world roughly follow the same playbook. Their strategy is ultimately fear-based divide and rule. It's about undermining constraints on power and punishing opposition, all with the goal of staying in power indefinitely. Now, we were actually given a blueprint of the authoritarian playbook in the US with Project 2025, which describes in great detail the ideological purges of the federal government, the dismantling of government agencies, and the targeting of opponents and perceived enemies. All of these elements of the authoritarian playbook are on display right now. So we've seen the directing of investigations against critics, The Trump regime has restructured and politicized the DOJ. They've established the so-called weaponization working group led by loyalists like Pam Bondi to direct investigations of former prosecutors, political opponents, and deep state officials. They've purged career DOJ and civil rights attorneys, particularly in the voting section, and they've replaced them with ideologically aligned staff. They've also used pardons to license lawbreaking. Many of the January 6th rioters have already received clemency, and the administration has signaled more pardons will be used to protect allies and suppress dissent. We won't open the chat for this, but everyone could put in the chat their favorite person that has been pardoned by this administration. It's a pretty long and motley list. Third, we are seeing the use of regulatory retaliation against opponents. Law firms and institutions that are tied to DEI initiatives or litigation against Trump allies are being directly targeted through federal investigations and the loss of contracts. They've eliminated federal DEI offices, purged data on racial disparities, and empowered agencies like the EEOC to investigate reverse discrimination in some firms. They've also sued media outlets like ABC and CBS, and you all have seen that recently the Stephen Colbert Show has been the latest victim of politically motivated retaliation. Third, federal law enforcement overreach. Now, immigration enforcement has become a key vector of authoritarian overreach in this country. ICE is being used to conduct raids far from the border, including in major cities like New York and LA. ICE agents are operating in civilian clothes and masks. Also, the regime has authorized the sharing of Medicaid data with ICE agents, a move that has weaponized public health against vulnerable communities. So the overreach is extreme, and that's what a lot of people are feeling viscerally. Deploying the military domestically. So Trump has deployed thousands of National Guard troops and Marines to cities like LA under the pretext of protecting ICE operations. These deployments have usually occurred without local or state authorization, which is having the effect of normalizing the use of military force for domestic political purposes, which is fundamentally authoritarian. And finally, the autocrat won't leave. Now, you all know that Trump continues to deny the legitimacy of the 2024 election outcome. He's promoted conspiracy theories. He's vowed to go after those who have challenged him. And now he's been invoking monarchic imagery like long live the king and legal exceptionalism, saying things like, he who saves the country breaks no law. And, you know, we've also heard him threaten to stay in power for a third term. So these are all kind of elements of the authoritarian playbook that are on full display in this country. And at the end of the day, an important thing to I think, reinforce as you're talking about this with your communities, it is all about fear-based divide and rule. It's about the federal government doing whatever it can to entrench power, silence dissent, and centralize control so that it can remain in power indefinitely. Next slide, please. However, Donald Trump is not acting alone. Authoritarianism is not an individual or a small group of individuals. It is a system upheld by organizations and institutions that provide authoritarians with the social, political, and economic power they need to maintain control. These pillars of support include businesses, faith organizations, bureaucracies, professional organizations, police, security forces, and many others. And it's important to note that these pillars of support are present at the state level. They're also present at the national level. And we all have relationships. So maybe you can open the chat for a moment just for folks to put in the chat, what pillars are y'all members of? Like who are your groups? Because this can help also show how you have leverage and power in this moment to move people within these pillars. Yeah, lots of different pillars out there. Way too fast to keep up. So an important point here too is that these pillars are not monolithic, and power within them is fluid. So these pillars are made up of individuals who have different identities, motivations, and interests. Within the business pillar, for example, CEOs have different interests and motivations, and they respond to different incentives compared to, say, shareholders, or compared to workers, or compared to consumers. So there are many opportunities to move people within these pillars based on their different interests, their different loyalties to the authoritarian regimes. Now, when members of these pillars stop cooperating with an authoritarian regime, workers restrict or deny their labor and skills. Businesses speak out against authoritarian practices or withhold financial contributions. Bureaucrats do things slowly or ineffectively. Faith organizations stop providing moral approval for autocratic regimes. Police and soldiers defy orders to use violence against protesters. When these things happen, these forms of non-cooperation, it becomes difficult or impossible for autocrats to stay in power. And this is one of the most important findings from the research on effective civil resistance campaigns around the world, is that when you bring about loyalty shifts and defections in key pillars, that is critical to the success of pro-democracy movements. So next slide. So this importance of pillars and their ability to kind of withhold and restrict sources of power to the regime highlights why organized non-cooperation by these pillars is so important to the success of pro-democracy movements. So just revisiting, what are we talking about with non-cooperation? This is a set of tactics that involves refusing to cooperate or comply with requests, demands, or orders. And it is generally the most powerful set of tactics because it involves directly removing sources of power from an authoritarian regime. You are not asking, you are not advocating, you are directly taking power away. And enough non-cooperation within these pillars causes them to crack. And when the pillars crack, then they no longer are able to hold up an authoritarian regime. And in a really key concept that Daniel spoke about is that lots of people can engage in non-cooperation. Individuals, groups, pillars themselves, and entire societies. So I'm now going to turn things back over to Ash to talk us through some specific examples of non-cooperation going down.
That means y'all got to stop sending me messages on the internet for like, just give me just a minute to get through these. So big ups to Maria for giving already so many examples that we could go through. Next slide. We're just going to give another few that, again, you might remember us talking about last time, but we'll get into more specifics tonight on this call, and especially on the final call of this series. So you can see the business pillar. We saw a bunch of folks in the chat say they were in the business pillar, that they were small business owners. Well, some folks are already doing this. You can see that it's happened already. Dodger Stadium owners refuse to allow ice on their premises. We know that they actually did this after an incredible woman of color decided that she was going to sing the national anthem in Spanish, even when she was told not to, right? So her stepping into her courage actually might have influenced these incredible business owners to do the right thing and go against law enforcement complying with ICE in their space, right? Pushing against what was frankly, the administration is trying to make the norm, right? So this business saying no is non-compliance. We can up this ante though, right? We could join activists who have begun asking local businesses in their city, in their town, in their community to put up no kings, no ICE signs in their windows, right? Now listen, for my rad revolutionaries that might think this isn't important, I feel you. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's very meaningful to me too. But actually, what I've learned is that the more my neighbors can see that they're not alone and being against ICE, the more that they're willing to take courageous next steps, right? So there is no too small way to be non-cooperative, right? This is actually a really critical way to make sure that millions of us, not just thousands of us, but millions of us can plug into this work to be non-cooperative. So again, one way that we could make this happen more is just by going and asking like the coffee shops that we go to, the other small businesses that we utilize to actually step up, put no ICE signs in their windows. Next slide. Now, again, I lost count of how many people I saw that said that they were in the education pillar, whether they were teachers or students, whatever your connection is, alums, we see you in the chat as well. So again, this is already happening, right? Harvard's refusal to comply with Trump's orders set a contrasting precedent for academic institutions versus like a UPenn or Columbia. Now, what I'll also say is that between last call and this call, a little birdie told me, or maybe several little birdies told me, that Harvard might be capitulating now. Well, guess what? That's a lesson for us. There was enough pressure to get them to be non-compliant. And then what happened? The administration met that pressure with more pressure, which is putting Harvard in a position to have to choose. Is it worth continuing to not comply? Or is it worth actually giving them what they want, which is like hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Well, if we increase the amount of pressure that we were putting on, then maybe we would show that it was worth it. So again, we know they might, I know that when I say Harvard, y'all might be like, Ashley, they about to sell us out. I would say then that gives us an opportunity to increase our pressure to keep them non-compliant. What can we do to make this stuff happen more? Well, if you're an alum, you can join the letter campaigns that folks are already creating to send to your school administrations, right? We can also look for other pressure points in towns and cities with large local colleges and universities, right? This is something that we can do wherever we are. I know I used to work for United Campus Workers. We built solidarity across students, faculty, and staff, community members to put pressure on our universities and our state electeds that dictated budgets to actually make sure we were paying like our campus workers living wages and that our universities weren't sweatshops. We can continue to do that and increase the amount of energy that we're putting into making sure that the education pillar is one that topples, that is pushed by our non-cooperation, that brings them into courage because of our non-cooperation. We can do it individually, and we especially can do it collectively. Next slide. So we've talked about business, we've talked about higher ed. Now we're going to go back to business, but not from the perspective of the business, but from the perspective of us, the consumers, right? Again, this is already happening. We've seen of it, and actually, I feel like Daniel, Maria, correct me, Nora, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like some indivisible folks might have had something to do with a little bit of this, right? That this
Absolutely.
Avelo Airlines stuff, right? Um, they've been facing so much pressure for enabling ICE, and they just shut down their West Coast operations, right? So we know that people power actually is making that happen. It's not just their goodwill. Am I right, Daniel?
Absolutely. That's absolutely
Okay.
right.
All right. And then we also have seen how many of y'all saw the Tesla takedown stuff? Y'all, they have explicitly impacted Elon Musk's ability to be able to buy elections, right? We've seen the Target boycott. Shout out to Nina Turner. Shout out to Reverend Jamal Bryant and all of the millions of people that have made what started as a Lenten fast a huge nationwide boycott. And both of those companies, all three of those companies, are facing major blowback from customers for for their alliance with Trump. Now, that's a great start, but there's so much more that we can do, and there's so many examples, y'all. I don't have time to go through all of them, but just to name a few, I've already named Target, also Dollar General. Those boycotts and protesting their cancellation of DEI programs is a concrete way that you can throw down right now to say that that kind of disgusting compliance with this racist and homophobic and xenophobic administration is actually not something we're willing to capitulate to, right? And we're going to prove it by not spending our dollars in places that capitulate and cooperate with that evil. So those are just three examples of what's already happening and what could be happening to scale if each and every one of us plugged in. Y'all, the thing that I love about noncompliance is that there are literally hundreds of tactical interventions at your comfortability, at your risk assessment, at your time, place, and conditions that you can do that individually and as a collective to make sure that you're being non-compliant. This is the most accessible movement that I think I've ever been a part of. So I'm excited to be one of the thousands of you that are on these trainings, and I'm excited to see you all hosting community gatherings to invite your neighbors to join us. Daniel, I'll toss it back to you.
So here's where we are. So we're in Ash's room, in your house. And the question is now, what are the different pillars that we represent, that we have some access to, that we're trying to either move or wrestle with or work on. And what you said, Ash, is a tricky point because on the one hand, it means we have tons of different options available to us. And also, we're at a stage in which we're doing a lot of individual and collective non-cooperation, and we're wanting to get to the big mass thing, just tell me what to do. But we're going to have to build some of these things along the way. So, what are some of the different things? And this is a moment in which we would break you into small groups. I would say, look, let's get into small groups, groups of 6 to 8 or so, where you all maybe like 3 or 4, even if depending on the size. I want you to turn to some people next to you, and I want you to chat about what are some of the pillars that you're connected with. And either I want you to think about, and you can go to the next slide here, and I want you to think about either um, what are what are the pillars you're connected with, and how are they upholding the regime? And in those pillars, what kind of defiance is already happening? And then what could more look like? And then who are the key people in your pillar who you could influence? And I want to invite you, if you're thinking about education, I don't want you to necessarily think about like the big giant scale of education, but like your school, your institution that you're connected with. Bunch of you said that you're associated with universities. So, name your universities or people with faith, like name your faith community. And think about again, how does your pillar support the regime in some way? And what are the different ways that it would need to uh, break away from that? And what are the different acts of defiance of non-cooperation that it could participate in? So what you saw, Ash kind of set us up with a few examples, and then we send you into some small groups, and then we'd have you like go chat and like have some luscious conversations. Lacking the ability to do that in 10,000, 20, what are we, 30,000 now? Just
We
the
did
numbers.
think about doing it.
Yeah, we did think about doing it. And we said instead, let's actually just kind of open up. So we'll open up the chat and people can kind of throw in what are some of the different ways that your pillars are already in defiance, or what are some things that they could do more of? So feel free to chat, put in that in the chat, and we'll kind of run through that. And Ash, Maria, we're just gonna jump in and kind of grab some pieces that we're kind of observing and so forth. So I'll just say, like, I'm already hearing people saying, like, we don't allow ICE in. So they've already taken stances around how they don't allow ICE in. And then publicizing that, like the next step becomes we have a policy and then we have to publicize that policy so that other people get to know about that. I think signs is such a helpful way to sort of signal a growing movement. What else do you see?
I mean, I'm seeing faith communities really stepping up. So I can say I'm a member of the Catholic community. So that's the church that I was brought up in. You're seeing, Catholic leaders. I'm thinking of Bishop Michael Pham in San Diego, who joined an interreligious delegation and like showed up at a courtroom where there were immigration hearings happening. There were ICE agents in the hallway, like waiting to detain the immigrants. And like this delegation, as soon as the ICE agents saw them, they scattered. And so this act of solidarity. And so me as a member of the pillar, like I can show support for that. I can send thank yous to folks, religious leaders who are involved in the kind of accompaniment, in the protective witness, who are standing up. These are some of the things that I can do.
I see a couple of things I also see is like talking to your sheriff around your sheriff agreements. So fighting the 287G agreements with ICE that have been negotiated. And another one, someone mentioned like, I want the big centralized action. And I just want to mark, I join you. And that thing gets built by small scale. Those, if you go back in history, big actions, they come through small things over time getting built up. And so we'll need to add a bunch of those things. Ash, what else do you see?
Yeah, I mean, you stole one of mine. I was thinking about all the incredible pastors and clergy that across the country have been calling for meetings with their the sheriffs in their congregations and saying like, hey, it's actually immoral and unconscionable for you to be partnering with ICE. So I appreciate all the sheriff's accountability work that's been happening with faith folks and even frankly before faith folks were engaged in the campaign. So I'm excited about that work. I'm excited about the work that I'm seeing where folks are actually stretching across difference in preparation for things like Labor Day. So for my friends that like are ready for the next big action, I hear you. That's one of the ones that's going to be an opportunity. Shout out to our May Day fam. we're gonna replicate that. And last but certainly not least, I feel hyped about the way that folks are thinking about mutual aid in relationship to non-cooperation. Let me give you an example. So I live in the state of Tennessee. Y'all know we've got an authoritarian trifecta in our state level. And we already didn't our governor didn't expand Medicaid. On top of that, the big beautiful bill is making folks even more precarious, healthcare access even more precarious.
Yeah.
So there will be ways, certainly, that folks are non-compliant by protesting and doing all the other sort of boycott things. But one of the things that folks are also thinking about is when the administration does something, takes something away from our people, how can we actually build it as a form of non-compliance with that administration? So I'm going to shout out all of the Divine Nine Black Greek letter organizations that are thinking about health fairs. I'm shouting out all the national mutual aid networks that are like are showing up and making sure that our communities have access to healthcare. Is a big FU to this administration that thinks that they should be prioritizing profit over our wellness. So I'm excited about all of the ways like that folks are thinking about non-compliance that is actually helping us consolidate and build our collective power and taking care of each other.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about unions and other groups that are using their retirement and pension funds as a source of leverage. So pushing back, this was a key part of the Tesla takedown, actually, was, using influence over, shareholders based on, the holdings of pension funds to demand split that Musk like essentially stop supporting authoritarianism and the dismantlement of the federal government. So I think increasingly looking at the enablers of ICE activities within our pension funds. So who are the companies that are enabling ICE? And Daniel, I know in the past we've shared a link that offers up a map of like all the ICE contracts across the country and like who is profiting from ICE. This opens up a huge avenue of potential activity using things like pension funds and retirement funds, and the potential withdrawal of those funds to push back on companies who are enabling ICE activities.
Great. So we have a whole bunch, and I think I just want to say a few more things, which is one, you may be part of more than one pillar. So it's not like you're just one pillar. Two, we've listed some pillars, but not all of them. A number of you have been adding, what about media? Media are absolutely a pillar. One of the things that media are not doing right now that would be so helpful is explaining the authoritarian context that we're working in. So we're actually filling, in a way, a kind of way of non-cooperating is we're actually filling in a role that media should be doing, which is explaining the context. It's not just one action that Trump's doing and another action and oh ho hum over here and the totality of what's happening should be given perspective. And the fact that the media has been doing a terrible job of that, or a terrible job of giving explanation stories about what are the examples of non-cooperation happening.
But Daniel,
Someone else mentioned,
Daniel, on media,
yeah,
can I give a really great example of like
please.
non-compliance? So I believe the Indivisible in New York City recently just organized a march to like CBS Paramount headquarters with a list of thousands of signatures denouncing the retaliation on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So actively saying like we will not comply and putting pressure. So that was a pretty cool recent act of non-compliance targeting the media sector.
Great. So there's lots of options. Another one that someone mentioned is like T-Mobile as like another example of non-cooperation where like, again, we're seeing like economic pressure is so critical. For those who are not tracking, T-Mobile has a relationship with, they're trying to, in September, trying to decide whether or not they give support, a relationship with Starlink, Elon Musk Starlink. And so, of course, if we're no kings, we're against the all the people who want to be kings, all the billionaire oligarchs who are trying to run the country, whether it's from government or from whatever position they live on as wealthy folks, and so critical. Actually, we've been able to. There's been a breakup amongst these two, but as you know, breakups can often they don't all last. So all these different ways of getting economic pressure. It's one thing for me to just say I don't like such and such. It's another thing for me to not give money to. again, as a consumer or as a taxpayer or and so all of those are what we're talking about in the field of non-cooperation. And so if we were back in Ash's room together, we would debrief this with each other, giving examples as people are already doing. And I love that people had many. Some of us don't have examples. Totally fine. Some of us were stuck in an institution that has not moved and said, I'm not going to move. And so either we might decide to leave that institution, or we might decide to be just in that institution, but just poking, grinding at it. And there's an incredible history of people who have been inside institutions that haven't moved, haven't moved, haven't moved. But at some point, the autocrat may come for them. And so I'm reminded in this context of the Bonhoeffer, Ray, of Dietrich, I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Who's the quote? First they came for the Jews and I wasn't Jewish, then they came for the gypsies and I wasn't gypsy, then they came for and I wasn't gay, and on and on and on, right? And so he was a pastor who had been a fan of Hitler, and eventually Hitler actually started to target him. And because of his opposition, because he was trying to keep a free church, essentially, and as a Christian. And so Hitler came for him, and he realized, actually, I should have been standing up for people all along. So just because an institution has not moved at this moment in time doesn't mean it will not move. And so for us to not necessarily assume this is how it's going to go, the autocrat has to keep creeping more power towards them. And that means institutions or pillars that haven't yet defected, they will all have an opportunity in the future. And so that reminding of a kind of future storytelling assists us, or assists me, to do more than just be in sort of woe is me because I'm in a tough position. But to remember history can change, history dances. So I want to turn to the next slide, which is the last step in this kind of part two content piece, which is for us to then we would sit around with in Ash's room and think about who might we reach out to plant additional seeds of non-cooperation outside of just our immediate circle, but like who's out there. And so the ask, and I'll just read that the sort of the invitation that's at the last line, which says to write a note or to reach out to someone in your circle who's doing non-cooperation to encourage them, or someone who could be doing non-cooperation. So, for example, I was thinking about example ahead of time, but I was thinking like one place I could start. I live in New Jersey, and I was thinking about like the attorney Desiree Grace, who she man, this is complex as some of these stories are, but she's the first assistant U.S. Attorney General. She was appointed by after Trump's trying to get his person to be in role. The court said, no, we're not actually allowing that person. We're going to put Desiree in. Desiree is not a handpicked Trump person. And so she's following the legal procedures. They then fired Desiree. Trump attempted to fire her. She said, no, you can't fire me. I'm going to continue following. It's a complex story, but she kept saying, I'm going to follow the law as I understand it, and I'm going to follow the legal procedures, even if you, Trump, are not. And so she insisted on that and the high value of that and kept going in that direction. But actually, that's not someone I'm really close to. She's not really in my circle. It's pretty far out, kind of a further out. So I thought, like, who's someone like in my? So I thought of my friend Leaf. So Leaf has been part of a crew up in Vermont where they've been tracking deportations that have been happening largely through airplanes. And so every morning, they have a rotating crew who goes and checks in the morning at the local airport and identifies folks who are being deported by ICE and going up to them and immediately giving them support, making sure they have a lawyer, making sure they have connection, making sure someone knows where they're going, but also assisting them to have communication with airlines because airlines, not a Velo, but other airlines have policies that they don't do human trafficking. They don't send people over who don't from one place to another who don't want to go. And so then they help that person communicate directly to the airline and say that person does not, they're going against their will, about their wishes. And so they've been able in some places to pause or avoid deportations in moments. So that I could write a letter to Leaf, say, Leaf, I'm so keep going. But I think actually I'd pick someone who I don't know. I don't have a relationship with. And so I'm gonna pick one of my librarians. So there's a couple libraries nearby where they've set up like uh, stations of banned books. I thought it was great. I love that. What a way to show your values and in such a high value way. So that's what they did. They just put up a whole spot where you can see it. Our library hasn't, my local library hasn't, but I could write a note to them to say, hey, if you did it, I'd so support you. And I want you to know I'm in your corner, cheering you on because you're going to have to push back against this thing. And so that's a way for me to be in better formation, just to connect to. It's an easy way for me to connect. I could do it every morning if I wanted to. I mean, just as a practice. But what we're asking is everybody to find one at least note that you're going to write or generate. I say note, a letter, a text, email, whatever, to somebody who's already doing a non-cooperation. Ash, Maria, who you got? Who might you write to?
Maria, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, riffing off of Daniel's story, like, I don't know if my local library has a banned books kind of display, but if they don't, I certainly could reach out to them and ask them to kind of, to raise the visibility of the banning of books, which of course is a core element of the authoritarian playbook. So I can do a little research and find out, and then that's someone who I could definitely contact. I could definitely reach out and talk to folks in my local church about getting involved in kind of, solidarity actions for immigrants undocumented who are going to their trials and to court cases. So how to accompany them, like get them to involved to not cooperate with kind of ICE attacks and to prevent them from being attacked, detained. So those are a couple things I could do in my community.
Absolutely interested in sharing accountability to doing that in my faith space and social spaces as well, Maria. And I'm hyped about getting some of my folks to be intentionally thinking about what are we going to do for Labor Day, right? I live in Tennessee. There's stuff that we could do that is both like pushing back against the ICE presence in our state, making it possible for more workers to be out, whether they're documented or not. I'm excited about thinking about the ways that we can throw down around Elon Musk's like major computer, AI computer in West Tennessee that's already making black folks sick. I'm excited about the T-Mobile campaign. I'm excited about so many things that I can literally just get in the text threads right now and ask folks to do, up to and including hosting community gatherings and just signing up to come to the third webinar in the 1 Million Rising series for folks that are like, I just don't know what to do yet. I'm looking for some folks to train me up. I'm looking for some folks to give me some direction about meaningful work that I can do. So I'm going to talk to my pastor. I'm going to talk to my friends about coming to 1 Million Rising. And I'm going to talk to my friends about seeing what we can do to get ready for Labor Day.
Next slide. So where we are, we've done part one, we've done part two, big content piece. That's really where the chunk of the whole session is that we're inviting folks to lead. And a big chunk of part two, I just should mention, is one of the reasons we're asking people to like just what's the next step or also like write a letter to someone else is one, we need to support courage. There will be more escalation, there will be more risk for many of us. And so we need to support more risk. It helps to identify and appreciate who's already taking risks because many of those people already feel out there. Many of you got on this call and mentioned it's good to not feel alone. So that's one reason for both writing letters to other people to show appreciation. That's one reason to also be in formation in gatherings with some other people to keep that feeling at bay. And in fact, to not just keep it at bay, but to dismantle it by being connected with others. So that's part of the reasons for part two and why some of those specific asks, but also your group will come with different ideas, different things that they emerge with, and that's fantastic and lovely. And you'll see us, we're modeling a lot of examples because there are lots of different pathways in. for people to do non-cooperation. And so you'll have your own set. And again, this isn't the moment to necessarily make a decision. The hosting that we're doing isn't asking you to make a decision as a group. You don't all have to agree. I think the language you said, Ash, was we might not agree, but we will be respectful. Okay, so hope you're keeping notes about what are we doing, what are some things that you might want to pivot on or note, etc. And then we're going to drop into the last part of the host gathering, part 3. Ash, closing, next steps, take us home.
All right,
Oh,
friend.
actually, next slide. So I'll just mark. So we're just inviting people to make next steps. In the guide, we have all the steps written out, and so it'll be a little different, but you'll get the feel. We'll have people do a little go around, etc. But Ash will bring us into a kind of invocation, benediction kind of moment.
Indeed, indeed. So again, I want to remind you that if you feel nervous, if you feel scared, if you're worried about your capacity to bring people together to take collective action, makes total sense. This is a time of this administration trying to make us feel so scared and so fearful that we're inactive. And I don't want to lose, y'all. I want to win. I want to win and see us all there at the finish line celebrating that we salvaged democracy and frankly made it even more possible in the experiment that is the United States. I want to see us get to the finish line and see all of our folks of color, all of our otherwise marginalized and targeted communities there at the finish line. I know it's possible because folks would have told me even a month ago that it was going to be impossible to get 130,000 people to sign up to be on a webinar about non-cooperation, and we've done it twice in a row. So I know it's possible because you all are making impossible things possible every single day. And if we get 4 or 5 people in a room together, 10 or 20, 100 or hundreds, thousands of people in a room together saying that we will not cooperate with an evil administration that is attempting to destroy our values, that is attempting to win by making us all infight with one another, that is trying to consolidate their wealth and power at the expense of our communities and their well-being, we say no. We say no. And we say we are going to make a commitment to every small and large intervention that we can make that makes it impossible for them to be comfortable in that evil. That's our work, friends. So we would invite people to make a commitment, right? We don't do this so that we don't come to these trainings just so we're smarter people, because smarter people do not necessarily a world save. We come together to learn together so that we can take that new knowledge and put it into action and change the conditions that we're living in, right? So when we come together, whether it's on these webinars or it's in person at our community gatherings, we ask folks to take a next faithful step. Now, if you, like me, have been overwhelmed by all the opportunities, right? All the many tactics that you could say yes to, all the history and the current assessment of what's going on, and you are overwhelmed, this is your moment, because all you have to do is see the utopian vision that you want to get to, that is our healthy, thriving democracy where everybody has what they need, and figure out what your next faithful step in this non-cooperation journey is. What's your faithful next step, right? We would go around and we would allow folks some time to share one sentence about what they're taking away from the gathering. Not just because we want to hear everybody's voices, though that is true, but because it really literally in that moment gives people an opportunity to be in their courage and be vulnerable and share in ways that we can then hold each other accountable to. And then you can use any remaining time that you've got talking to one another, building community. Down south, we might sing a little bit. Or maybe we're just kicking it, socializing, watching some trash TV, sharing a meal, breaking some bread, drinking some drink, right? We would actually be in the practice of being in community with one another. That's what I would do if I was closing it out, Daniel.
Beautiful. Next slide. So that concludes sort of what the session would look like. And so as our final pieces, we're going to do a few logistical pieces, make sure that you have all your links, all that kind of thing. But we want to make sure that we just take a few minutes just to reflect on facilitating a host. What are some of the different things that you might do, say, or how you might act in a way that is welcoming to people and that might support those of you who are hosting a gathering, or even if you're not hosting a gathering, but you may have a conversation about some of these things. What are some of the things that you saw us say or do, or ways we did it And so this is a moment where I'm just inviting you to look at your notes, if you took notes, if you're that kind of person, and just look back on, is there anything that you want to uh, note of what we did that you might want to, that was useful? Plenty of things you might have critique, etc. I love a good critique. But in this moment, just to share like things that you might find useful. And you can just put them in the chat. We're going to open up the chat so that people can just put in what are some of the different pieces. And again, what we're looking for is kind of facilitation-y tips to each other, kind of holding space tips to each other, how to be a welcoming host, how to talk about autocracy, what are some of the different ways and rhythms. And again, you will notice and observe uh, the three of us are very different stylistically. And that's beautiful. That's wonderful. So people are mentioning a lot of like energetic, positive vibes, speaking genuinely from our values and experience. It's so important, I think, especially for us to not put on more airs about what we do and don't know. There's a ton we don't know about how this will unfold. So that's a great one. Let's see. Acceptance. Yeah, I'm just following these. Ash, if you can help me just kind of like other pieces. Samantha pointed out the quote that you said, we might disagree, but we won't be disrespectful as an opening phrase that Ash said to help set the stage. And that does make it a lot easier for later on. Any other pieces that you're catching as people are writing
One
beautiful,
of
wonderful
my
things quickly?
favorites that I've just seen in the chat is that we can be positive and optimistic while also being realistic, right? That we can be balanced in an analysis that is actually pretty dire while also giving people something to look forward to and be hopeful about, because we have to believe that we can win to actually get folks engaged enough to be able to implement a strategy that allows us to win. So I
Yeah,
think that's a really great one.
great. Let's go to the next slide. Let's kind of walk through some. We just wrote up some facilitation tips, but also in the host guide, there's a one pager that also provides some of those resources. And don't worry, we will get you all those links. We will make sure you are not walking away with link lists. We'll make sure all those resources are to you. But just five facilitation tips that I wrote down that I found useful as someone who's been facilitating. Ash, myself, and Maria are part of a group called Freedom Trainers, and we've been just leading a lot of these trainings. So five things. Number one, uh, and just follow along with the slide deck. So keep going to the next slide here. So number one, just be yourself. Truly, 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 truly. Be your authentic human self. We're going to win this thing only by being human. This is not a Superman moment. This is not a superhero moment. This is just us. Two, ask questions that invite stories, not just opinions. So the language I often use is the open-ended question, the elicitive question, the question that will elicit from people about their own experience, their own life experience, rather than just saying, "What do you think would?" But what pillars are you connected to, and what have you already seen them doing? Um, Three, framing as much as possible. So frame the space. We're exploring. We're not deciding everything tonight, for example. That's a framing to help people get out of the argument phase. Ash used another great framing of we might not agree, but we're all going to be respectful in this space. So number four, like when there are shutdowns, like people say, I just don't know what to do, or a disagreement about one thing, note those. And often a framing can be helpful. Yeah, we don't have to all see it the same way, or we don't have to know everything, but here's one next step that we can do. And so watching for shutdowns and instead, whenever possible, inviting more caring. And sometimes as a facilitator, I might not know what to do in a moment, and there may be some wisdom in the room. I believe there's always wisdom for all of our problems are in the rooms that we're in. It's my belief, my philosophy. And the fifth is a saying that we used to have at Training for Change, an organization I worked with, which is you can't go wrong if you love yourself, if you love your participants, and you love your content. And so more than anything else as hosts, I just want to invite you into a space of go with love and join with love, because that's the way we're going to move through this thing with the greatest steps. So thank you on behalf of all of us. And we're going to hand it over to last step, which is just some logistics around making sure you get all of your links and so forth before we close out. Over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll bring myself back up here as well. Okay. Wow. Hey, everybody. Actually, you know what? I just dismissed my chat, but I'm going to pull it up again and turn it on. Y'all, we'll hear a few final last words from them, but I just want to ask folks to get in the chat and give some love to our facilitators, Maria and Ash and Daniel, the Freedom Trainers, and some of their colleagues. Just give it up real quick. Really appreciate what they brought to this space, as well as everybody on our back end team and all of you. Still 17,000 on Zoom, and I think maybe 5 or 6,000 on YouTube watching with us right now. So gonna pause it one more time because we got a lot of links to drop for you guys. But yeah, I just want to do a bit of a wrap up on some of the logistics. Okay, so here's the deal. If you haven't already scheduled a community resistance gathering to talk about mass defiance and strategic non-cooperation, it's really not too late, okay? And it's pretty simple. We give you these tools and toolkits, and that can make it seem like it's whole thing, but it's kind of just like any moment in your life when you would like invite a couple of people to do something, okay? It could be a few friends and neighbors, maybe some people you don't know so well, but this is an opportunity to connect with them. You can host it at home. You could host it maybe at a public park if you've got good weather where you are, a library, maybe a coffee shop. You know, there's a lot of different options, but keep it what makes sense for you. And we have a platform called Mobilize where folks register their events so that we can support you with resources, and also you can track your own RSVPs. We can see if we're getting to this ultimate goal of 1 million folks upskilled and on board with our strategic framework at this time. Why don't we drop the link to the Mobilize platform for one thing? I also just want to throw out there as far as am I the right person to schedule a gathering, like, or to host a gathering? That might be something you're asking yourself. If you are already part of some larger network, like a neighborhood mutual aid group, or maybe an indivisible local group, something like that, you can host your gathering within that group, but also if you're like a more, maybe not a leader of that space, you're like a member, you're somebody who shows up and participates, this is actually a great opportunity to host a gathering of your own and maybe invite in some other people that you don't always see in those community spaces and those organizing or activist spaces. Because again, we're really trying to bring more folks in. And this is a moment when a lot more than ever, people are looking for a place to feel like they can channel their action. So next up, the guide that I showed those screenshots of, the host gathering guide that I showed screenshots of at the very beginning of the training, and that the trainers just walked us through the sequence of over the course of tonight. We're dropping that link in the chat as well. That's where, yeah, you'll see the flow and the agenda, suggested time, a lot of the same images that we used tonight, those images of the pillars, those the graphic around authoritarianism, that's all in there for you to follow along with, and some basic language for how to talk about it with other folks. Those prompt questions, for a lot of time you're going to spend brainstorming and in conversation with folks. How are we connected to the pillars, and what does that mean about our options for participating in non-cooperation or pressuring people with influence and power to participate in non-cooperation? Let's go ahead and drop as well the link to the recording of session 1. So if you missed us 2 weeks ago, that recording's still up. You can go get the download there. And just to kind of give a preview of what's coming up, we're going to have our next gathering, our next 1 Million Rising session. It's the last one in the series right now. We'll see what happens after that. 2 weeks from now on August 13th. That'll be a chance to learn a little bit more about both national campaigns that folks can plug into and other ways to take actions. The idea, though, just to give you a little bit of a preview, is that you'll host another gathering after that with that same group of people so that you can be in conversation in your community one more time about taking action and non-cooperation. And I just want to reiterate, I'm sure there's folks out there. Well, actually, let me give a quick numbers thing. I think as of tonight, right before I got on Zoom, I saw that we had 750 gatherings registered on Mobilize, which is amazing. That's like, yeah, that's huge. You know, each of those gatherings is probably going to have, you know, like, well, I'm currently bad at math. I haven't always been, but I'm not going to do the math on it right now. But great to have the 750. However, we still have like several thousand people on this Zoom call right now who maybe you haven't gotten a chance to register your gathering yet. So tonight could be a great night to start thinking about the scheduling, figuring out where and when, and go ahead and get up there. But I do also want to acknowledge, for those of you who do not think that you'll be in a position where you're going to be hosting, I just want to reiterate something that I think maybe Daniel said at the beginning of this call, which is these conversations, these topics, there's going to be moments in your life when they show up, and other opportunities to kind of take these ideas, bring them to people, and be ready to look for opportunities in your life. Plant those seeds of non-cooperation, like folks were talking about earlier. Okay, I think that about covers it. I'm going to leave the chat off for just one more moment. And actually maybe just bring the other folks. Yeah, if y'all want to come off mute, I'd just be curious if there's any like closing words that you all want to end with before we open up the chat to hear how folks are taking away and close out the night.
Sure. Well, one way I'll just make a quick closing is also a note of apology. I'm embarrassed that I got Bonhoeffer confused with Martin Niemöller, who was the person who wrote the poem that some of you have seen variants of. It wasn't just a written poem, but he gave speeches, a Lutheran theologian for years afterwards, his support for Hitler. But he gave that poem. First, it came for the socialists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there's no one less to speak for me. And I think that's a great moment to also just the invocation of why it's so important. Even if they're not on our doorsteps yet, they're on our neighbors' doorsteps. And so that's why we have to act now, because that lesson isn't just a lesson of that lesson is a that story, that poem is an invocation of fear of what happens if we do not act. And therefore, we have a right, responsibility, moral imploring, a need, and an opportunity to show what it means to be a good neighbor. So I just wanted to correct my mental fart and also to just reiterate the value of where we are right now, which is a moment in which we get to show what it looks like to stand up for each other, even if we're not personally under attack, because we are all attacked together.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Daniel. And there's so much great energy in the chat. People like saying what they're already doing, the non-compliance that they're involved in. And, this is funny. I know like I technically should ask for permission, but my mom has been on this webinar and she listened to the conversation. And immediately, like she wrote to say that the governor in her state has said that he will not use the state's National Guard to accompany ICE on their visitations. So I think I will write. Not only will I write, I will call the office to thank the governor for doing that thing. So anyway, like so many great ripple effects, and I'm so eager to hear what comes out of the community meetings next week. And I wish everyone the best of luck with that. But don't underestimate the power of small things to have ripple effects. And that's what ultimately brings about change. So thanks everyone on this call for everything you're doing.
I'll be quick. So many people tonight in my DMs and in public posts have said, I'm just a regular person. Like, give me something that regular people can do. And I just want to be super duper clear that a lot of the folks who are now on pedestals that I created, leaders of the civil rights movement like Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer, folks that are still with us like Cortland Cox and Charlie Cobb and Judy Richardson. I could go down the scroll, Barbara Arnwine, who many of y'all have seen on previous mass calls. There's so many folks who were also just regular people who took a chance of doing something with a handful of other people and actually made collective world history more possible. So I get it. You might not think that this community gathering is going to be the thing that topples the Trump administration. I get it. But I want to invite you to have a little faith. It might be you and your little 4 or 5 friends that change the trajectory of what is impossible and make it a little bit more possible in this country. That if we can practice love and respect for one another, if we can practice making evil uncomfortable through non-compliance together, if we can practice peace and justice and accountability with one another, that maybe we could be bigger than the sum of our parts and bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice together. I get it. It might not feel totally within our realm right now, but I promise you, if you fake it till you make it with me, we will end up winning. I know, because we've done it before. It is in our bones. This is our inheritance to beat back this authoritarian regime, not only to beat them back, but to uproot it so it can never grow its ugly head again. This is our turn. So I feel excited to be a regular person with you, doing really courageous things to make impossible things more possible. Thanks for being on the call tonight.
Thank you so much, all of you. And the slide is now true. The chat is back on. Just didn't want to cover up those final words. But yeah, folks, tell us what you're taking away from tonight. And we will see you on August 13th. Thank you so much, everyone.